Okay. Good evening. Thank you for tuning in. Wow, we've hit 780 subscribers since the last live stream, which I really appreciate that. I've just uploaded a video saying thank you to that. It's been a bit of a quiet week in sport this week. Gregor Townsend has come back with his own press release regarding the Finn Russell situation, and I think the whole situation has been badly handled by all parties up in Scotland with the rugby union there. I think Finn Russell hasn't helped his case. I think Gregor Townsend had to respond in a press conference, but I think his job should be focusing on the Six Nations and the playing squad that he's got available, and just they've got to try and tune out what Finn Russell is saying in the media and focus on themselves. A lot of people aren't in favour of Gregor Townsend keeping the job. A lot of fans are unhappy with how the team is performing under him. And that's for the Scottish Rugby Union to decide, if the Six Nations is a complete and utter disaster and they lose all 5 games, for example, let's say they lose to Italy badly, which is a must-win game for them, then that's up for the Scottish Union to decide, the direction, his future. On aspects to do with Israel Folau, that's still an ongoing issue. That's dividing opinion. A lot of people just want to see him play. I actually want to see him play, regardless of my personal opinions of his off-field conduct, because I think it's going to be really interesting to see some of his quality in the Super League. It's going to be really, really interesting. I mean, Sonny Bill Williams has already started playing in the Super League, and it will take him a while to get up to speed. The Newcastle United takeover, I get asked a lot of questions about that until we actually get some firm details coming out about what's going on. I mean, I'm hoping for a positive conclusion for Newcastle fans. I mean, this has been a long, protracted, drawn-out saga with Newcastle United and Mike Ashley's attempted sale of the club to a variety of interested parties. It appears that Matt Staveley's bid is still on the table. It appears that Peter Kenyon's second bid is still on the table. The fact that there's been so much in the news about it, over the last 3 years. It has dragged on. I don't think it's helping the club's fortunes, and the club is not where it needs to be. When Amanda Staveley tabled her bid, Rafa Benitez was still manager. Now we have Steve Bruce, so that's changed, and that's been dragging on and on and on. But until there's some more concrete developments and more press releases, I ain't doing a video on it. I'm not going to do a speculative video because that's just clickbait, and that's not something that I enjoy doing. And I think it has to come to a conclusion soon, because the longer it drags on, the more damaging it becomes. Manchester City banned from football for 2 years. Now, this is something interesting that I was not aware of. Let's have a look. Let's have a look, see what's going on with Man City, because I'm not a big fan of Man City. Wow. Okay, this is just broken on the internet. When I recorded my 780 sub special, I mean, that's going to be interesting. Wow. Oh, they've been fined 30 million euros. They've been banned for 2 seasons from next season, from 2020 until 2022. Serious breaches of UEFA's club licensing and financial fair play. Manchester City say they're disappointed but not surprised by the prejudicial. So the battle between Man City and UEFA continues. The independent or judiciary chamber of the club financial control body, the CFCB, said City have broken the rules by overstating sponsorship revenue in its accounts and the break-even information submitted to UEFA between 2012 and 2016. And it added that the club failed to cooperate in the investigation. Man City said in a statement the club has always anticipated the ultimate need to seek out an independent body and process impartiality. In 2018, UEFA publicly previewed the outcome and sanction he intended to be delivered to Man City before any investigation had even begun. And they're saying that other constant, flawed and leaked process. So they're saying that it was a prejudice case against them. They are alleged to have inflated the value of a sponsorship deal and breaking, obviously, financial fair play rules. Now, financial fair play, we know, is a flawed system. UEFA have admitted it's a flawed system. And this battle's been ongoing now for a while. We know that Man City fans aren't big fans of UEFA. We know that European games don't draw as well as their league and cup games at home. They turn their backs on the UEFA anthem, for example. They boo the UEFA anthem. Pep Guardiola has come out the media several times and said, look, let's just get behind the club. We're playing a game against whoever, regardless of the competition. Let's try and, get some European success. But now it looks like they're not going to have any European success. Whether they go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport over this decision, we'll wait and see. But AC Milan were banned from European competition, and they took their punishment and took it on the chin and got on with it. So this is not the first club to fall foul of UEFA rulings on European participation. I will do a video on this, but I want to get this live stream out of the way. But the fine itself is pennies to them. But will this affect them in signing players? Because obviously a lot of star players want to play in the Champions League or Europa League. So they can't play in either European competition. That's something of note. So regardless of where they finish and what trophies they win this season, let's say they win the FA Cup, which is an automatic qualifier for European competition, or the League Cup, they can't take up their qualification place. So with the runners-up in those two competitions, like Aston Villa, whoever gets to the FA Cup final, if they play Man City and Man City win, do they automatically qualify in place of Man City? So there's implications domestically as well. But we saw this with AC Milan for breach of financial fair play a couple of years ago. So Man City aren't the first club to be hit with this punishment, and they won't be the last. But UEFA have admitted that financial fair play doesn't work as intended. They've admitted it's a flawed system, very similar to financial fair play in domestic leagues. The various governing bodies have been criticised that the system is not impartial. It's doesn't necessarily work, and if it was properly implemented, multiple clubs would fail. So it is interesting. What does this mean for Pep Guardiola's future? He did say when he signed his contract extension that he wanted Champions League, to win the Champions League with the club, and that doesn't look likely unless they win this season. But of course, if they win the Champions League this season, they're barred from defending their title. So there's a whole host of implications, which means they also can't play in the European Super Cup at the beginning of next season if they win the Champions League. So they're automatically, kicked out. So it does affect domestic competition. It does affect who qualifies for European football from the end of this season. So the top four is what it is. I've mentioned the Newcastle takeover. Until we get firm confirmation of a bid really reaching critical stage, it's just clickbait. It seems to have gone quiet again. We know that multiple bids are active, but at the end of the day, Mike Ashley and his attempts to sell the club, he's overvaluing the club. We've seen multiple bids stall, couple collapse. We know Amanda Staveley's still interested. We know Peter Kenyon's still interested. For Newcastle fans' sake, I hope a deal is done soon, because yes, they got through to the fifth round for the first time since Mike Ashley's ownership. Winning the FA Cup could be a boost that could help the club. Is Steve Bruce the right guy to take the club forward? I mean, look, he's in the position. He wasn't the first choice to take over the role when Benitez left, but Benitez, had a battle over transfer funds. Adam Pardew was highly critical of the ownership, ex-manager. Sam Allardyce turned down the job to go back. So managers aren't happy with how the club is run behind the scenes. I think for the future of Newcastle United, a deal needs to be done, and new ownership needs to come in and some fresh impetus, because the longer it goes on, I think, what could Newcastle take a step back next year? They're a club with one of the most loyal fan bases in English football. They turn up week in, week out. How long are they prepared to do that? We know fans are starting to get frustrated. We know fans are not renewing their season tickets. And at that point, things have gone horribly wrong. Newcastle has always had really good crowds, really good support. It is the city's club. The whole city buys into it. When fans are starting to stay away and refuse to buy season tickets, and that tells you the situation is getting critical. It tells you a deal needs to get done, and whoever takes over really needs to have fan involvement in the running of the club, because what we've seen over the last 3 years plus is a protracted takeover saga that I think has damaged the reputation of the club, damaged the reputation of English football, and has done nothing to help Newcastle. When he put up for sale, the club was 7th in the league. Look what they are now. They're not in the same position. They have taken backward steps. Benitez worked miracles with not getting a lot of support from above, and the fact he stayed along as long as he did shows his credit. And Steve Bruce, I mean, a lot of fans weren't happy with his appointment, but again, he's working with an owner who is clearly disinterested in running the club. He doesn't. He wants to make his money and take his money and leave. So I feel sorry for Steve Bruce in the position he's in. I felt sorry for Rafa Benitez. I had some sympathy for Alan Pardew. He works miracles as well. But there's only so many miracles you can work in a sport where money talks, and their transfer policy has to be questioned. Their youth policy has to be questioned. The fact that they're not developing the same caliber of player they were in the 90s, is telling. They used to have a great production line of youth talent and the long staffs are great talents, but they're not producing the quality of player they were a decade, 15 years ago. So pre-Ashley era, the youth needs investment. The transfer policies that they've had and the players they've bought cheaply and sold and not kept shows the direction the club is and where what their ceiling is right now. And Benitez was frustrated with transfer policy. I think Steve Bruce is pretty frustrated with transfer policy as well. And it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see, when Mike Ashley's gone, what players and ex-managers actually really do say about them. I think they're going to be I think a lot of people are highly critical, and the way there's been 2 relegations in there, and it's not been a happy time since he's taken over. The club's halved in value. It is what it is. He has pumped some money in to begin with, and then as time has gone on, he's put less money into the club, and the club has stagnated in its position, and sometimes got relegated out of the Premier League, which is not what should be happening to a club like Newcastle United, who in the 90s were one of the best clubs in the country and one of the best, most competitive clubs in the country, coming close to winning 2 FA Cups and coming close to win the Premier League in the mid to late 90s. They were a club that players wanted to play for, and they did attract some really great, talented players, not just from England but from all over Europe, who wanted to play for the club. Now they're a mid-table team at best. They're an average, solid, not outstanding side, and that's not where Newcastle were 20 years ago. They were a really exciting team. They haven't had European football for a while. It would be nice to see Newcastle United back in European competition. I think they've had some great European nights over the years. They've been really entertaining to watch over the years. And as a kid growing up, watching them play in Europe was really fun. I've got a lot of friends from the Northeast. Having a club from the Northeast in Europe, it was fun, and that hasn't been the case. So hopefully a deal gets done, but until we know the full facts and things that are going on and where bids are actually on, what the press actually report, we'll have to wait and see. On the Man City side of things, I'm not surprised with the outcome. We know it's been a long, protracted saga with UEFA, and the club have stated from the outset they believed that they've resigned to the decision. But AC Milan also knew when they were getting done. I made an example of a couple of seasons ago. But how does that affect Guardiola? We'll see what happens with Man City and how that affects who qualifies for Europe out of the English Premier League this season. If Aston Villa are runners-up in the League Cup final, they're automatically going to qualify because Man City are barred. And if Man City make the FA Cup final win, again, is the runner-up going to qualify? And also the top 4. Does that mean aside from outside the top 4, how does that affect European qualification? There's big implications of Man City getting kicked out of Europe for 2 seasons. Massive implications. Absolutely massive. And we don't know where the club's going to be in 2 years' time. And we don't know if they are going to go through the Court of Arbitration for Sport to get a conclusion to and appeal the decision. AC Milan didn't. And their precedent's been set. So we'll see what happens and we'll see what the outcome is and if they appeal. But I think they're resigned to the decision from what's been released in the media. I think they're accepting of the decision and it is what it is. But a lot of fans will be rejoicing at Man City getting kicked out of Europe for 2 seasons. A lot of fans will be overjoyed with what's gone on. But we'll have to wait and see what happens and how the club responds on the field. I think players are going to be pretty frustrated that they're not going to be able to play in European Cup competitions for the next 2 years. And how does that affect recruitment? How does that affect the transfer market? Will Man City be able to attract the same caliber of player that their league rivals around them are? That's going to be really interesting to see. I think PSG and I think AS Monaco as well are also in breach of financial fair play. I wouldn't be surprised if they're the next 2 clubs on the chopping block by UEFA. That's going to be really, really interesting to see the outcome of any further financial fair play investigations. We know there's been rumours linking, PSG and AS Monaco to breach of financial fair play. Definitely PSG. AS Monaco, second wealthiest club, again a wealthy billionaire owner. It's going to be interesting. Very, very interesting. Ironically, PSG have never made the Champions League final, whereas AS Monaco have in their existence. So that's an interesting one to look at. Is money doesn't always buy you success in certain aspects. Man City have never made the Champions League final, so it's going to be really interesting to see if UEFA go after some other clubs. I think it's a sign of the times. I think the footballing governance have realised the money side of things has got out of control. But they've also admitted that financial fair play doesn't work effectively. They've admitted that, publicly in press conferences. Oh yeah, this system doesn't actually work as it is intended. So whether we see financial fair play and how it's set up and things change, we'll wait and see. But I wouldn't be surprised if PSG, AS Monaco, possibly Chelsea as well. That's another thing to look out for because Abramovich and how much has gone into the club. There are some other clubs I think that will fall afoul of financial fair play. Could some of the like Real Madrid and Barcelona fall afoul of it as well? We'll see what happens. A precedent was set with AC Milan a couple of years ago. Now we've got Man City added to that list. I think the list is going to grow. I think more clubs are going to fall foul of financial fair play. Well, however flawed the system is, be it domestically or across the continent, I think more clubs will feel UEFA, coming along. And AC Milan didn't, contest their ban, so I don't know what Man City can do. They could take it to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, but the AC Milan precedent is there, and I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if PSG are next on the chopping block, and possibly AS Monaco. I think UEFA have realised things have got out of hand for too long, and the French league is so uncompetitive since PSG had all that money pumped into it. That it's not fun to watch as a spectacle anymore. Before the ball's even kicked for the first match of the season who's going to win the title. Same in Scotland for the most part of the last decade or so. So I think there is a change in focus now with UEFA. Does that mean player wages drop? Does that mean the transfer market is peaked and we won't see a record-breaking transfer again, with the Neymar transfer being the record? That could be a possibility. But we'll see what happens. We'll see if PSG get banned. And at the end of the day, I think football has lost sight of its working class origins. I think it's got to the point now where there is too much money in the sport. The agents have far too much power on transfer fees. I think the transfer market is massively overinflated. Wages are overinflated. Ticket prices are too high. The TV deals are skewed in the wrong direction. The lack of accessibility for viewing on TV, in the sense that subscription TV is taking over and free-to-air TV is losing out. That's a massive talking point. Fans aren't happy about a whole variety of things. I think fans have been put on a back burner for too long. Fans' concerns haven't been taken seriously enough. We saw a lot of disgruntled fans over the Champions League and Europa League finals, the ticket prices, the travel distances involved. I think fans' concerns have been brushed under the carpet for too long. We've seen so much scandal in football with corruption scandals and match fixing scandals that something has to happen. And yeah, we know financial fair play is flawed, and we know that if it was properly, rigorously enforced, 70% of top flight clubs in the top 5 leagues in Europe would fall afoul. And then it makes a mockery of the European competitions. It makes a mockery of the domestic competitions and docking points and throwing teams out of leagues. It completely, I think we've reached a tipping point now. We have reached a point where we've now had 2 clubs in 2 years banned from European competition. More are going to follow. Will there be a change to the financial fair play rules and how they're structured? I think there has to be. There has to be a change in governance. There has to be more transparency. But at the end of the day, I think the money has ruined the game. The sport is not what it was 10, 20 years ago, I think. As I say, player wages, for one, is just extortionate. The transfer fees are extortionate. Um, the amount of money clubs have, the amount they're charging for tickets, merchandise is wrong. They have milked the football fan for too long. And I think there's been some pushback. And I think club owners are realizing they can't get away with what they're getting away with. And the governing bodies are realizing that a sport with no fans is not really a sport. It's a hobby played by enthusiasts, and I don't think we want to get to that stage where empty stadiums are there. It looks really crap for live TV. I think the fact that half the Premier League clubs in 2016 could have let fans in for free and still made massive profits without hurting their bottom line tells you all you need to know about how overinflated and how bad the situation with money destroying the fabric of the game when clubs at the lower level are going out of business. Um, it tells you everything that's wrong with modern football. Um, Other sports are starting to head the same way, and I really have concerns long term about what is sport these days. Yes, it is a business, but there has to be a point where it's sustainable, and at the moment, it's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable business model because while transfers have gone through the roof of player wages and agents' fees, the average fan, his living standards or her living standards have been squeezed. And I think fan pressure is having an impact on the direction the sport is starting to take. And hopefully the governing bodies take note that we're pissed. We're not happy. And looking at the FA Cup this season, for example, the amount of empty seats at games and the dropping attendance is telling you something. It's telling the governing body we're not happy. We are staying away. And clubs like Bury going out of business and Bolton and Macclesfield being against the wall. If the lower league clubs die, the sport dies. A building is built on strong foundations. So if the lower tiers are really up against it and struggling, it will affect the structural integrity of the league pyramid. A building falls down if you weaken the basement. And if clubs at the lower levels are struggling and going out of business, it's a matter of time before the building topples over. That's the analogy I use. And that has to be a breaking point. The bubble has got to burst soon. I don't know how much longer it can continue with the amount of money in the game, the corruption allegations against so many leagues around the world and so many clubs. I don't think it can continue unchecked. It cannot. It cannot continue unchecked. Man City getting banned from European competition, AC Milan getting banned a few seasons ago. That is UEFA's intent. They're setting their stall out now to say enough's enough. But I think UEFA have mismanaged club football in Europe for a long time, and the various domestic FAs have failed for a long time in governing the sport. The sport has been badly governed for too long. For too long, it's been badly governed. Lack of transparency, lack of accountability, corruption. For too long, it's been badly governed, and now it's starting to affect things massively. With lower attendances at certain leagues, some clubs really struggling financially. I think, the money bubble, I think, is starting to deflate, at least, if not burst. And with the fact that Man City have been done for financial fair play, will we see another record-breaking transfer? Will Neymar's transfer be the biggest transfer of all time? And will that record ever get passed? We've hit 700. What's going on? Well, outside of the channel, I think my living situation, I'm going to have to move yet again. I'm going to have to move at least twice in the next 12 months. So that's going to affect the channel somewhat with upload schedule and things like that. But the channel's still going to exist. Work's been busy. On the sports side of things, obviously the Jay Bouwmeester situation in North America is a big one with his heart problems. But in general speak, it's been a quiet week for sport until literally Man City were banned from European football competition. So that's pretty much the biggest story at the moment. Rugby Union, Major League Rugby's third season's kicked off last weekend. So they've started playing games again. That's going to be fun to watch to see how that plays out this season. We've obviously Six Nations is having its first bye week, so that's on a break. And there are rumours in 2023 they might want to add South Africa to the Six Nations, which I think making it the Seven Nations is madness. I don't think that's ever going to get past the planning stage. To be honest, I hope it doesn't. And that's something to discuss: is the future of the Six Nations? Could it become Seven Nations? Rugby League, Israel Folau, he's now still dividing opinion. I'm looking forward to seeing him play in Super League because he's one of the most skillful athletes Rugby League has ever seen. But it's going to be interesting to see how the fans react to him and how players react to him and how that all plays out. Yeah, the Jacksonville Jaguars have got 2 confirmed home game dates back to back. So they're playing 2 of their 8 home games in London this coming season. So it's interesting with the NFL thing. I mean, the debate will an NFL team go to London? I'm going to say no, because the plan was to have a team in London by now. And I go back to what the Boston Celtics NBA, chief operations officer or CEO, I think it was, had to say about when he was interviewed, I think a year and a half ago, in regards to a major league franchise being based in Europe. So we're covering the NHL, Major League Baseball, NBA, and NFL. And he was interviewed. Well, what's the likelihood of a major league franchise being based in Europe, London or another city? And he went, not a chance. It's not viable. Too much has changed economically, and that was very, very, very blunt to the point. He answered the question very quickly, saying, "I don't think it's going to happen," and that tells you what you need to know. And the fact that also Sahih Khan failed to buy Wembley a year and a half ago, and the negativity that attempted purchase caused amongst sports fans in this country, I don't think it's gone down well. The fact that you now have multiple stadiums hosting NFL games, I think it's just going to be an overseas series. But not all the NFL teams have played games in London yet, be it home or away team. So until the NFL has got every single team to play in London, you cannot have a team as a franchise based in this country. Not all the NFL teams have actually played a game in London yet. And the fact that Jacksonville are going to have 2 back-to-back, Sahih Khan has his football interests, soccer interests, because he owns Fulham Football Club, who play in the second tier of English football. He owns Craven Cottage, where Fulham play. He doesn't know Wembley. He tried to buy it, and the public reaction was mostly negative. Most sports fans and general public, because there was taxpayer money involved in building the stadium, were like, "Get your hands off." The FA didn't come out, which is the Football Association, which covers English football, didn't come out looking good either. Lots of negative reaction, and he decided to go, "This is not working." He owns Fulham Football Club, who play in West London, which is down the road from Wembley. It's a fair drive, but it's in West London, not Northwest London. He owns that stadium. The club haven't been successful under his ownership. They've been really poor. They've been in the Premier League twice and relegated twice under his ownership. So, yes, he owns multiple sports teams. They're not very successful. Not very successful at all. He's also got, AEW wrestling. His son's involved with that. So he's got multiple sporting interests. But if you look at the teams he owns, they're not very successful at all. They're not successful at all. They're badly run. They're shockingly poor teams. They don't have great winning records with his ownership. And the way the fans responded was mostly negative. I can't see how the NFL could go, right, there's a struggling team in Jacksonville who don't, for the most part, have a winning season. You've got to convert the other 31 NFL fan bases that this country has, because this country supports every single NFL team, to support a team that's crap. And the amount of money that would be asked for a ticket, I don't think it's sustainable financially and viably. Travel distances, player welfare, different currency, different tax rates, how are you going to get around that? The fact that, was it a year and a half ago, that 5 Jacksonville Jaguar players were arrested for, misbehaving on a night out. I don't know. The NFL obviously, keep pushing this, London series. They're also wanting to push Mexico City, and the NFLPA aren't happy with that. So while it's a great, occasion and a great event, I think this is as far as it goes. Is they just keep playing regular season games in London. Whether they get a Super Bowl in London, that's something I think might happen before a team gets moved here is having a Super Bowl in London. That is more likely to happen. But Wembley Stadium itself isn't a great arena. It's regularly criticised by fans of a variety of sports that get played there, be it football, which is soccer for you guys, football for me, NFL, rugby league, the Challenge Cup final, rugby unions play games there. Fans, for the most part, are very critical of Wembley Stadium and the atmosphere and the pricing and the distance from the pitch. It's not the stadium that it used to be when they rebuilt it. I think the fact that sports fans have been so critical of Wembley over the years since it was reopened in 2007, and Club Wembley have been criticised for ticket prices and the food and drink prices, and fans aren't happy. And if you look at the Challenge Cups, if you look at Rugby League, the last two finals have had the lowest attendances since World War II. And that tells you something. Last year's attendance was low. The season before, they half-filled the stadium. So, again, it's all is not well with Wembley as a location. We'll have to see how White Hart Lane, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, does with NFL this season as well. That's going to be really interesting to see what fans' reaction is to having games played there. Really, really interesting to see the response from fans, because the Wembley pitch cannot cope with football, rugby league, rugby union, and NFL. It just cannot. It just falls to pieces. And when England play their football games there and the rugby league and the rugby union, they have been very, very critical of the surface getting torn up. And so that's something that they have to bear in mind is the playing surface. Twickenham was a capable substitute, which is the home of rugby union, but that was a short-term thing for a couple of years. But I don't know. The fact that two stadiums a season are now used for the NFL, I don't think we're going to have a London team. I really don't. Sahih Khan couldn't get Wembley purchased. It was it didn't sit well with British fans. I don't know how it was received over in the US with his attempted purchase of Wembley, and I don't know how NFL fans in the US feel about a team being put in London, because that's some feedback I haven't heard. All I've heard is British fans, and very few are in favour of having a London-based team as well. I think it'd be interesting to see what American fans think of having a team in London, and that's something that the NFL has to bear in mind as well. Is their existing fans in the US what they feel about having a team put in London? I think I don't. Well, the NFL players don't want to play in Mexico, so the NFLPA is going to have a big say on what happens, and the league has to tread carefully. I know the NHL players like playing in Europe on these exhibition games or these regular season games, head back-to-backs. They like doing it, but it's only 2 teams a season come over, or a couple of teams a season in the regular season, a few teams in the preseason. And they seem to be in favour of, because there's a lot of European-based players in the NHL, of giving back to the fans, where, and going back to the countries they come from that help develop them. But I think that's the difference, is the NHL goes all over Europe. It doesn't stick to one location. It takes the sport to multiple locations, and most of Europe plays ice hockey, and it's a very popular sport over here in Europe. NFL, I don't know. XFL, no, I don't watch anything that is owned by Vince McMahon. I don't watch wrestling anymore. I don't watch XFL. There's a reason why it failed 20 years ago. I don't know how successful it's going to be with how the AAF failed to complete its inaugural season. It'll be interesting to see how XFL plays out. I didn't watch any. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out as time goes on. But seeing as it failed last time, I don't know how successful it's going to be this time. It's going to be interesting. I think the NFL does need a challenger in American football, because the CFL has only got 9 teams. And I don't think the CFL gets the credit it deserves, because it's a better brand. I think it's a better game. It's a faster pace. It's more fun to watch, but it's how they sell themselves outside of Canada. And the NFL was basically got a monopoly on American football, really. The CFL is too small. XFL, if they were to have teams in Canada and the US, I think it would be a proper challenger to both the CFL and NFL, and really for those leagues to up their game. But we'll see how it plays out. I'm not a massive fan of American football, if I'm honest. I think there's too many stoppages in play, which is frustrating. I didn't watch the Super Bowl this year for the first time in 16 years. Didn't watch the Super Bowl. but I got the prediction of the Chiefs winning, so I'm happy with that. But I've basically switched off American football over recent years. I've got to a point now where I don't find it as entertaining to watch. I don't enjoy it as much. And the amount of scandal that American football has, it's so commonplace that it's not really breaking news anymore. And how the Antonio Brown situation has been handled in recent times just sums up the situation with the NFL and American football in general, with off-field incidents involving players and owners and coaches. It's a sport that I've fallen out of love with, if I'm honest. And I don't know, if it can fix the off-field scandals that it's been beset with for years. It's been beset by scandal for such a long time that eventually there's going to be one massive scandal that damages the sport. Antonio Brown. I mean, that mental health issues or brain injuries or any kind of health issue, I think he's been failed by his former teams and those around him. And he hasn't covered himself in glory, and he should have sought help sooner. But the whole situation has been badly handled, and that hasn't helped the image of the NFL. That's my personal opinion. I think the whole situation has been so badly handled that it's actually embarrassing. He's showing some really bizarre behaviour, and it's showing signs of repetitive head injuries, concussions, mental health problems, probably bipolar, schizophrenia or something like that. But he's not been helped by the NFL as much as he should have. The NFLPA, I think, should hang its head in shame as well for not looking after one of its members. I think the NFL has let him down. I think the organisations he's played for throughout his career have let him down. And he could have dealt with things differently. And those around him, his agent, his advisors, his family, I don't think have necessarily done the best either. And he's got to take some responsibility for his actions. But the whole situation is not great. It's not a great image. It's not a great look. And mental health is becoming more and more of a talking point in professional sport as the years go by. The last decade, it's become a real talking point. So many sports stars have had issues, and we know of some who've taken their lives. But financially, I think 60% of NFL players post-retirement declare bankruptcy. So they're not well advised with how to spend their money either. You look at the bankruptcy rates of ex-NFL players, it's really, really high. So they are badly advised financially as well. The NFL and the NFLPA need to take more responsibility for looking after these guys post-retirement and while they're playing as well. This is where I look at other sports, and I look at the NHL, which is my favorite league, and now ice hockey is my favorite sport, and how players are looked after. There are issues like CTE and health issues, but how many NHL players declare bankruptcy? It doesn't seem to have the same number as the NFL. It seems the NHLPA and the league help the players out more financially and look after them and make sure that post-hockey that they do tend to have the right direction. The percentages of NHL players declaring bankruptcy is a lot less than the NFL. Do I think Scotland will get test takers? I'm assuming we're talking about cricket. Ireland, it was a very, very long battle with Ireland. That was a very lengthy battle to get Ireland and Afghanistan test status. In Afghanistan, obviously, with the conflicts in Afghanistan really disrupted them. But both those nations, it took a hell of a long time. Bangladesh, it took... how long did Bangladesh take? I think Bangladesh took 20 or 30 years themselves. So when it comes to cricket, I think if you look at Bangladesh, Scotland, Ireland, and Afghanistan, it took those countries so long to get test status. It was embarrassing, really. Bangladesh, obviously, recently winning the Under-19s Cricket World Cup, and are a pretty solid test side now. They've got some real star players, but it took them 20 years to get test status, which is shocking considering they're from the Indian subcontinent. I mean, that beggars belief. Ireland and Afghanistan, obviously, the political situation and the war there, that's disrupted things, but it took them less time. But a lot of their best players played in Pakistan or India or Bangladesh or the UAE anyway. And their journey has been quicker. But Ireland, it took so long. I don't know about Scotland. I really don't. I don't know if there's enough money in the sport north of the border. It would be nice to see Scotland get test status, but at the end of the day, it took so long for those other three nations to get test status, and a lot of battles and a lot of hurdles they had to get through to get to where they are. I don't know with Scotland. I really don't. And I don't know if there's an appetite for Scottish players to get test status or fans, or the Scottish cricket, authorities to get to that stage. You have to look at how long it took Bangladesh, who are a cricketing nation, from an area of the world where cricket is behind field hockey a religion, to get test status. That's all you need to know when a test side like Bangladesh took so long to get to that point, and they had, that cricket is in their blood basically in that part of the world. That tells you Sri Lanka took a long time as well. So established test sides now took decades to get accepted into the test arena. I don't know if there's the willpower in Scotland north of the border. There's definitely not the finance and the infrastructure in place that you sort of have in Ireland. The Dutch also play cricket. They're not, they're a great one day and T20 side. They're not at test status. Namibia haven't got test status. They play cricket because of their links with South Africa and Zimbabwe. There are other nations, I think, who are more deserving of test status as well because, playing, how many play at a high level, be it domestically or in other domestic leagues. I do think Scotland are well behind the ball. I think infrastructure is a problem. Money's an issue. And is there the willpower there? Is the direction there? Is it financially sustainable for them to get test status as well? I think Ireland and Afghanistan have to go through a lot of hoops to get to the stage they're at. I'm not sure if Scotland can get through those hurdles that we put in place. I really don't. I really don't think that they can. Scottish sport has got a lot of issues as well. It's not just cricket. You look at rugby league, rugby union, football. There's a lot of problems with Scottish sport. Motorsport notwithstanding, Scottish sport, ice hockey is pretty healthy. But apart from that, Scottish sport hasn't really got the infrastructure in place. There's a reason why when it comes to ice hockey, it's Great Britain. There's a reason why when it comes to athletics, it's Great Britain. Centralised funding is key. There's issues with facilities. There's issues with amount of players. How many cricket clubs are there in Scotland? That's something else at the grassroots level. You have to invest from grassroots first in order to build a platform to have a test side. And I think that's another problem is the grassroots level of the game north of the border. But I don't know enough about cricket in Scotland to really pass comment. But I know that a lot of their best players play county cricket in England and T20 in one days in England. So that tells you what you need to know about the situation is their best players don't play in Scotland. But you have to look at grassroots level, the universities as well. That could be a key point to get any kind of professionalism in place, really, domestically. But I don't know if Scotland will get it. I really don't. They haven't made. I don't think they made the last Cricket World Cup. So they that's the situation as it currently stands. I'm not sure where if there is the willpower either and the direction from the governing body to get them in there either. But you just look at Scottish sport as a whole, apart from individual athletes like in boxing, cycling, swimming, and a couple of team sports. Rugby union, okay, they've got the two pro league teams. You've got ice hockey with some professional teams. Scottish football, okay, it's the last season and a half is becoming more interesting in the Scottish Premiership, but they haven't qualified for a major tournament for 22 years. There are issues with infrastructure, involvement, participation, funding. I think apart from motorsport, I think Scotland doesn't have a great history. Let's be honest. In recent times, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens going forward, but it won't be anytime soon. I think the Dutch and Namibians and the Canadians, when it comes to cricket, are further ahead. With the situation, I mean, Canada's got its own T20 competition now. The Dutch are pretty solid at T20 and one-day cricket and have a pretty solid history in the sport. And Namibia, again, a lot of their best players play domestically in South Africa. I think they're countries that are further ahead when it comes to test status and if they get it. Personal opinion. And you look at Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and Ireland, and the hurdles they had to get through to get to test status. I mean, I think Sri Lanka only started playing test cricket in, I think, 94. Bangladesh, I think it was 2005. And Ireland and Afghanistan was last year. So that tells you how long the process is to get to the level of you're now not an associate member of the ICC, but a full-fledged member of the ICC. It's a very small, exclusive club, and I don't think Scotland are ever going to get to that top table. I really don't. It'd be nice to see them there, but I don't think they make it to the top table anytime soon. Right. What else shall we discuss? I'm open to any more questions. I'll go for another. I think I'm going to go until about 8:45, and then I'm going to head out before it decides to completely chuck down with a biblical thunderstorm. But that's an interesting point, though. I wasn't expecting a question about cricket, especially Test status of nations. But as I say, when it comes to Test status, it's to get to the ICC level, it takes a lot of hurdles. The fact that Zimbabwe are still members of the ICC and a Test country, considering they haven't really performed at Test level for 15, 20 years, tells you something. But to get to that level, it takes so long to get to the top table in cricket. I think cricket is one of those sports that needs governance reform and a change in direction. But it is what it is. A lot of the debate around cricket is not necessarily positive, and a lot of it comes down to governance and the formats and the future of the sport and corruption allegations. I think for Scotland to get to ICC top table, so no longer an associate nation but a fully fledged member, that could be 10, 15, 20 years away. And what the sport looks like in 10, 20 years' time, it could be massively different from what it is now. So we'll see what happens. But it's an interesting point. Not a question I was expecting. If I'm, in all honesty, I wasn't expecting a question on Scottish cricket. That's something new, but it's a long process to get Test status. It really is massive. But we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. But you have to look at grassroots first to get a good foundation to build upon. And I don't think they have that either. I don't think they have enough grassroots and amateur clubs. I don't think there's enough registered players to really say we can be a test side. All the other Test nations, it's played compulsory in schools. There's a good amateur playing base. There's a good domestic playing base. I just don't think that Scotland has that compared to Ireland. I think Ireland has a better foundation than Scotland by a long way, and it took Ireland donkey's years to get Test status. A long time, far longer than it should have. But it's also got to be sustainable for Scotland as well. It's got to be sustainable, and the players have to get paid, and that's another issue entirely, is money. But interesting question. Antonio Brown situation again. As I say, I think the NFLPA has some questions to answer on how they've looked after him as a player, as a member of the NFLPA, and the NFL itself should hang its head in shame. But it's a league that has had lots of issues with player welfare over recent years and how they're looked after. And the XFL, I don't know how successful that's going to be long term, and if it's looking how the AAF failed 8 games into last season in its first season, it's going to be interesting to see how the XFL does, considering that another rival league to the NFL failed pretty quickly, and also the XFL failed the first time round 20 years ago. So it's going to be interesting to see if it completes its first season and if there is the appetite for a second season, and if actually it can be profitable, it can make money, and it can be stable. That's something that is worth of note. All right, let's see if there's any more developments on the Man City situation, because obviously they've been kicked out of European club football for 2 years. Let's see what else is being said on that. Not a lot. Wolverhampton Wanderers Leicester City is 0-0 after 25 minutes. Hull City Swansea City is 1-1 at the moment. What else have we got? Leeds playing Hull KR in the Super League. Salford are playing Huddersfield in the Super League. What else have we got? There's not really a lot happening, really. Exeter are playing Gloucester in the Rugby Union. Glasgow Warriors are playing Zebra, but there's not much going on there, if I'm honest. Yeah, there's not really a lot going on, if I'm honest. Uh, yeah, there's not really a lot happening apart from obviously the Man City situation, which I will have to do a. Yeah, I've already know about that. I've already discussed it. I've only recently found out. I think the Man City situation, I'm gonna have to do a video separately, probably tomorrow morning because the time of day I'm gonna do that. Probably tomorrow. I've got to do a bit more reading on the situation because obviously we know it's been a protracted saga with Man City. We know that they weren't happy with the process that with the investigation. We know the relationship between Man City fans and European football has been great, and of course Guardiola, when he signed that contract extension, it was part of it was key on winning the Champions League and European success. They are not. He's not going to have that option for the next 2 seasons. So Guardiola's future. Can they, transfer market? How that's going to affect Man City attracting players to the club, and players want to, players go, I want to play Champions League football. I can't play it here for 2 years. Player loyalty is not what it was. So we could see a lot of implications, and also if Man City win the League Cup and FA Cup, for example, and where they finish the Premier League, European qualification from English football for next season. Does that mean the runners up in the League Cup and FA Cup, if it is Man City winning those trophies, does that mean Aston Villa, for example, get European football? Does that mean when it comes to the Champions League, with Man City being barred, does that mean fifth place gets qualification? So the battle for the European football, it now hots up. Sheffield United are in fifth. Does that mean they actually get into the Champions League qualification stages if they finish fifth because Man City being blocked from entering? That's an implication that I don't think people realise yet. I think it's going to have a wider implication for English football. It's going to have a wider implication for European football. We've discussed that PSG most likely are the next club to be investigated for financial fair play. We know AC Milan have fallen foul of it. Now it's Man City. AC Milan, as I said earlier, did not appeal the decision handed out by UEFA. They didn't go to court of arbitration for sport. They took it and accepted it. So I think Man City, they have to weigh up their options, but precedent was set with AC Milan. I don't think Man City really can win an appeal, personally. I think the decision's final. I think, and that does make it interesting considering that, they've never made the final, neither have PSG. And, question marks have been raised about, their owners' financial fair play rules. Are they effective? If financial fair play was effectively enforced, 70% of the top clubs in the top 5 leagues in Europe would probably fail. Definitely the Premier League. That would cause carnage. And then what are you going to do? Fine the club, stock and points, throw them out the league? I mean, it makes a mockery of what the rules are and how badly enforced they are. But I'll have to do some digging. I'll have to look, get my notes out and really look into the Man City situation. I think as the decisions come through late this evening, I think we're going to have to let dust settle, and then we'll have to look in the morning at what the situation actually is, the timeline of events, and really, what do we know? Has the punishment, has the investigation been fully transparent and fair and independent? That's what Man City are arguing the entire way through. When it was announced they'd been investigated, they said, "Oh, we'll be found guilty before the investigation's concluded." But a lot of non-Man City football fans probably are very happy at this decision. A lot of fans of other clubs in English football are probably very, very happy. And when it happens to PSG, which I think it will, I think a lot of French football fans will probably be quite happy when PSG, get caught out as well. We know they're breaching financial fair play. Look at how much they spent on Neymar and Mbappe, for example. So I think there's more to come from this. I think more clubs will fall afoul of financial fair play, but the system as it currently is needs reform and changing and repairing, because UEFA have admitted that financial fair play doesn't work. They've said it's not working as it should. They've come out, Infantino has said it's not working as it should. And that tells you something when the people in charge have admitted the system they put in place doesn't work. Because if it worked, Man City, PSG, AC Milan, they wouldn't be in this position. Wolves, they're a club in English football that people are looking at going, are they in breach of it? Chelsea, if it worked effectively, we wouldn't be in this position. Clearly, it doesn't work effectively. This is why, if you look further down the Football League pyramid, in England at least, clubs are all over the place. Clubs are going out of business. Bury this season. Clubs are financially difficult. Bolton. So it's a system that's broken. It's a system that's needed, but it's not working. And do we have to go back to the drawing board and start again? Do we have to tweak the system? That's for football governance to work out. But as I said at the beginning of the live stream, football has lost its way with the amount of money. Players are overpaid. Agents are not transparent enough. They're making a lot of money out of it. The transfer market's just wrong. Too much money in the sport. Too much money in the sport has led to this point where they had to come up with financial fair play, and then they fudged it. It wasn't really properly thought through and governed properly. Because of the lack of governance or poor governance or lack of transparency, we've got to this point where now it's a knee-jerk reaction from UEFA. AC Milan, now Man City, they're reacting rather than being proactive. They're reacting because the proactive steps they were taking with financial fair play were badly thought out. The clubs have flouted it for so long. And if they were to properly enforce it, Real Madrid, Barcelona, AS Monaco, Chelsea, Wolves, God, how many other clubs can I think of? So many clubs would be barred from competitions that it would make a mockery of the situation. We know AC Milan and Man City have been caught out. It's a matter of time before other clubs get looked at as well. It really is. But what can you do? The system isn't working. Clubs have flouted it because it's such a weak system, but too much money in the sport, not enough accountability, poor governance, and at the end of the day, it's everyone's played their part in a rather crappy situation that should never have come to pass. But Man City, a lot of fans are rejoicing at their ban from European football. Absolutely. The amount of reaction I see online on social media with fans not particularly happy with what they call the plastic club. Man City's got a great history, but a lot of fans are probably right now in their armchairs or down the pub having a little chuckle at Man City's European demise. Whether the FA decides to then hit them with a financial fair play penalty as well is a matter for debate, and the implications of does that affect European qualification and who qualifies for Europe this coming season in the Premier League and with the cup competitions. If Man City were to win the League Cup and were to win the FA Cup, those are hypotheticals because until the League Cup final and FA Cup final are played, we don't know, and Man City could get knocked out the FA Cup in the 5th round for all we know. And that it's the permutations and the complications. It's a big debating point, and there's more to this to come out, and we'll see if they do go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport and if they appeal. But at the end of the day, I think we know this has been coming for some time. We know Man City and UEFA have been at loggerheads. We know the Man City fans aren't particularly fond of UEFA, but and Guardiola's contract extension was dependent on them having Champions League success. If they win the Champions League, they can't, can play in the European Super Cup as well. So it does have implications, more than just for the next 2 seasons in Europe. It has implications for other competitions and qualification. So if they qualify, if they say they win the Premier League next season, or they finish in the Champions League places, they're barred from qualification. Does that mean the team in 5th gets Champions League football? Be it qualifying stages or group stages. I mean, these are the permutations of this and the impact of this. So it's interesting, and it's a talking point. And yeah, we'll do a video on it tomorrow morning, first thing. I think we'll have to see what else is said in the press and have a look at the timeline of events and what's going to happen really, and the reaction. I'm going to have to look at the social media reaction because I'm not a big fan of the mainstream media. I think they do misreport things. Fan reaction and reaction from those looking outside in is going to be really interesting as well. And we'll have to see what's said in press conferences, over the weekend, what Man City and Guardiola say and what the players feel. But I have a sneaky suspicion a lot of fans are going to be very, very happy at Man City getting barred from Europe. I think there's going to be a lot of satisfied football fans in England this evening. A lot of cheeky grins and wry smiles, I think. But it is what it is. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there. I want to say a big thank you for everyone who's participated tonight. I know it's a shorter live stream than normal, but I am going to go out and enjoy this Friday evening. I don't really go out as much as I used to. I'm going to have some fun on the town. But thank you very much for all your questions. And we started with Man City and we finished with Man City. And yeah, there is a video coming. I've got to do a lot of note taking, a lot of research, and I'm going to really dig into this 2-year ban by UEFA, because I think this is going to have implications much wider than just Man City being blocked from Europe. I think other clubs are on the chopping block, and it affects domestic football and European qualification. So there's a money aspect, and there's clubs that would not have been in Europe now getting into Europe, because that will affect the Europa League places and Champions League places. So thank you very much for all your participation. Really appreciate it, and I'll have some more videos for you tomorrow.